You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Thank you so much for joining me here today. We're about to go through the question, right? Is this true? Will working your abs hurt your lower back? Because there's a lot of people out there right now, a lot of personal trainers as well, who have been taught that by doing any type of crunches, by working those abs, you're going to end up hurting your lower back. And I want to explain today, and by the end of this show, you will know definitively, is it true or not true, and what you should be doing to work your abs and overall core in order to get better results. So one of the big drawbacks, like the first thing we hear about when we say, okay, don't do crunches. I don't know if you've heard this before, but it's out there right now. Don't do crunches because by doing that, you're going to start to round your spine. Again, I was taught this way back in the day, right? Way back in the day when I got my first personal training certification, I was told never do crunches with clients, never do crunches with clients. And I just couldn't understand this because I had done crunches before. I know athletes have done crunches. So I'm like, why shouldn't we do crunches? And then like literally brainwashed into my head, don't do crunches because it can cause bulging disc, herniated discs, poor posture, all of these things. And so I said, okay, well, you know, that makes sense. And I looked at these studies and they were basically studies done on pig spines. And what happened was when they had them flex in a machine, and I know all the vegans listening to my podcast right now are going out of their minds, and I agree with you, this is pretty horrific. But they would see that after about, I believe it was 10,000 flexions, all right? So that means crunching forward is essentially flexing the spine, and then arching backwards would be extending the spine, okay? Or just extending the back, right? So we have flexion, moving forward, extension, coming back, okay? So here's the thing. When we're forward flexing, bringing our chest towards our knees, what they found with these pig spines is that they literally broke. They exploded. The discs came out somewhere about just overall flexing at 10,000. And so I took that as the truth for many years. The problem is this. When I went back, and shame on me that I didn't do the research, but I was a big reader back then, like in my early 20s and through college, 18 to 22, through undergrad. Like I was big on reading, but I wasn't big on researching, meaning that I wasn't big on going back to the research. And here's why. When I was in college, the internet was dial-up. I don't know if anybody out there remembers dial-up internet. It was painful, like literally painful. Minutes for a page to download. So nobody really liked to use it. Like it wasn't just there yet. We used it a little bit for email and that was about it. So shortly after graduation, of course, the internet was good to go, But, here's the deal. So I went back years later, should have done it at the time. Now, whenever someone says something, I'm like, is that true? Let me look at both sides of the research. Well, now if you look at the research, and I did it myself, the pigs weren't alive. And there was also no counterbalance called reciprocal inhibition. So there wasn't the counterbalance, meaning that they didn't get to also flex what's called, in humans, the transverse abdominis. The transverse abdominis actually stabilizes the spine. So even if you're coming up and flexing the spine, you can keep your spine neutral. So really, what the research should have said, or what we should have been taught as personal trainers, was this. Doing crunches is bad and will hurt your lower back only if you are not controlling your spine by also flexing the other muscles of your spine, such as the transverse abdominis. And what are the transverse abdominis? Those are muscles that wrap around and under the rectus abdominis. Now, the rectus abdominis are the cute ones, right? They're the decoration on the outside. They're the 2, 4, 6, maybe even 8-pack that you've seen on people. Those are the abs we've called the rectus abdominis. Now, what we're talking about are the ones that act more like an internal weight belt. that help to protect your body from hernias, right? From overstraining, because those transverse abdominal muscles, also called the TVA, give you the stabilization of the spine. When you're squatting, when you're lifting anything heavy, when you're deadlifting, when you're doing pull downs, when you're doing push-ups, when you're doing a plank, the TVA are activated. So if we activate those muscles, not just letting your spine round, like literally not just go into that rounded position that I'm doing right now as I'm actually talking, by not doing that and by flexing those muscles around the spine, you can actually keep your spine safe. So now you will not get the same chance of injury if you're doing crunches the right way. Now, what's the difference between a crunch and a sit-up? Well, basically a full sit-up is, just said it right there, is going all the way up, right? It's coming from your chest almost all the way up to your quadriceps. Now, I've trained FBI agents back in the day. I've trained people that need to do a physical exam where they have to do a full sit-up. So what did we do? Well, we actually made sure that we were activating the psoas muscles to help with that sit-up. We were activating the other muscles, of course, such as the transverse abdominis, all of those muscles, okay? So it allowed them to keep their back safe. And I'm going to give the other huge part to this in just a moment of why we keep the back safe that way. So, and then a crunch is only really moving, I would say, right above the lumbar spine. So the mid-back, we'll call it the mid-back, we'll call it the thoracic spine forward. So you're keeping your back almost flat to the floor, still with the neutral spine. That means a little arch to the lower back, but you're actually just flexing the thoracic spine, okay? So I wouldn't say one's necessarily better than the other because they can all have their down points if you're not doing it correctly. But what happens is, in general, another way that you can hurt your lower back when doing crunches or sit-ups is that as you crunch, your hips actually tilt down and backwards under your body, meaning like your hips, your glutes, your butt actually tilts towards your heels as you're doing that crunch. What does that mean? Well, that's called a posterior pelvic tilt or posterior pelvic tilt. And that means this, that it actually begins to stretch the muscles, the erector spinae, the other muscles, the QL, quadratus lumborum, of the lower back and top of the hips. Now, if you don't have good flexibility in the lower back and mobility in the hips, what can happen? Well, you could actually pull a muscle, or those muscles, those larger muscles, can start to pull on the spine. They can pull on the smaller muscles as well, which can then injure your lower back. So what does that mean? Well, again, was it the crunch that was dangerous or the sit-up, or was it that you had improper hip mobility and you had tightness of the lower back? Most likely that, right? So if we're not activating our core muscles when we're doing a crunch or sit-up, and we have really tight hips, tight hamstrings, tight hips, tight glutes, right? All of those things, well, then we pull into even more of a posterior pelvic tilt. Okay, so what does all this mean? Well, the truth is this, that crunches, and this is the real truth, meaning like this is from the real world, that crunches are not going to create poor posture, as people say, that they're not going to hurt your lower back, that they're not going to cause more tension through the front of the body. I'm going to explain why in just a moment. Those things will only happen if there's imbalances, right? It's kind of like taking any vitamin in general, right? So people are like, oh, well, you can overdose on salt and salt can cause high blood pressure. Well, that's true, but only if you're not drinking enough water and only if you don't have enough potassium or magnesium in your body, right? So yes, you could have too much of those things, but you really can't if you have the balance of that. So here's why I want to explain that doing crunches and full sit-ups is honestly a myth. And I want to explain that right now. So when I'm working with an athlete, whether it's, your average person who just likes to work out in the gym, or they're an Olympic athlete, a professional athlete, here's the deal. They need to be able to do a sit-up or a crunch, and you do as well. You should be able to be lying in bed, and you should be able to sit up. One of the things that my doctor told me way back in the day, and this was actually, I had an MD, and he didn't know anything about natural health, and honestly, he helped me to be diagnosed with Addison's disease and a bunch of other things like POTS and all that type of stuff, which I won't get into right now. Incredibly brilliant, like literally incredibly brilliant man. I'm very, very happy that I got to work with him. But he couldn't help me heal from an underlying root cause, which is why I had to take my own healing to natural health practitioners, again, which I'm obviously deeply grateful for as well. And I try to carry their work on today. But what he taught me was this, is that he said, I test everyone in my practice when I'm doing a physical exam to see how they're able to sit up off the exam table. Do they have to roll to their side? That's weakness in core muscles, right? That's weakness in the ab muscles. Or Do they actually have to use their hands to pull up, or do they need my assistance? I'll tell you right now, I thought that was brilliant on his end, but also I've spoken with physical therapists and orthopedic doctors, and they said one really important thing, one way to keep yourself out of the nursing home, one way to keep yourself out of rehab is to be able to make sure that you can sit up on your own. It's really, really important. This is true. That you can sit up on your own and that you can get up off the ground. Again, you maybe you're laughing right now, but it's the truth. I've worked with people in just their 60s who aren't able to do this. And this to me is a crime on our culture. A crime that exercise and movement is not given more credence. That we're just said, hey, look for this pill, look for this low-calorie diet, look for whatever it might be. We need to take care of our bodies, okay? So I'm a big believer that you should be able to do a sit-up. You should be able to do a crunch, and you should be able to do those two things without throwing your back out, right? I mean, if you throw your back out legitimately, I can't say it was the crunch or the sit-up. What I can say is, yes, maybe it was the form, but honestly, it was the counterbalance. So let's talk about that right now. The only way that you can really hurt yourself is with improper form. So, of course, you're watching your form, right? That you're flexing the entire core. But the other big thing is this, is that even before you start to get into the crunches, you start to get into the full sit-ups, you should be doing a few other things. And that are things to strengthen the posterior chain. Believe it or not, one of the best ways to strengthen your core and make your abs look great and make your waist smaller is by actually working your lower back and the entire posterior chain, which includes your glutes. I've talked about it before by doing the Romanian deadlift. If you haven't checked that out, you have to go back to stevencabral.com/727. Because on that show, I gave you the 2 exercises that you need to include in every single workout. And it's just so important that you're doing this thing called the Romanian deadlift. Now, again, you might need a form practice on that, but even before that, at home, you can learn how to do a proper bridge. Okay, if you don't know what a bridge is, go to YouTube and type in bridge exercise. And I want you to start with a very simple one, okay? You're going to roll up a towel or put a small yoga block between your knees. I want you to keep your feet on the floor. I want you to keep your ankles right below your knees. What I want you to do is then so first you're going to start with your heels and feet on the ground, glutes on the ground, lower back on the ground, hands by your side. Hold a towel between the knees. Okay, what I want you to do next is slowly, so you don't throw out your lower back, raise your hips up so that you form a diagonal between your knee, your hip, and essentially your shoulders, okay? So your head's on the ground, shoulders on the ground. You're going to squeeze your glutes. You're going to work by putting the towel there. It doesn't allow you to cheat. Now you start to bring in your adductors. You start to work your glutes more, and you work your lower back. Now don't hurt yourself, but try to work yourself up to 60 seconds. Maybe the first day you can do 10 seconds, and your legs are shaking, and your whole body's overloaded. Totally fine. Over a month, try to work up to 60 seconds. It's one of the best ways that you can strengthen your glutes and lower back and keep them safe, okay? The only people that would be contraindicated for, which would essentially be heart disease, high blood pressure, or if you're pregnant, you would not do that exercise because your head is below your heart, essentially. Okay. So another great one is the plank. Most people have heard of the plank before. It's just typically done incorrectly. So a plank is both forearms are on the ground and you're on your balls of your feet, okay? Now, you want to lift your hips higher than parallel to the floor. Most people get them parallel to the floor, but the problem is they have a big arch in their lower back. So they're only tightening their lower back. I like the hips a little higher. Pull those abs in tight. Flex the abs so everything just stays cinched in tight, almost like you're about to get hit in the stomach. Flex everything tight. Work up to a minute over 4 weeks. You can do that. Maybe you start at, let's say you do 15 seconds week 1, and you do that every day, okay? Then on week 2, you're going to do 30. Week 3, 45 seconds. And then by week 4, you hit 60 seconds. I truly believe you can do that. That will dramatically strengthen your core. Those are just 2 easy exercises too. And then you can look up bridge variations, and then you can look up plank variations, and you can work your way up. I might have even talked about them before in training on previous Training Thursdays. Okay, but now here's another big one. After you do those, you're then going to begin to do an exercise called a chop. But I want you to do the chop without rotating your hips or without rotating your head. So what I want you to do, I want you to attach a band to a door or use a cable, anything you want with a little bit of resistance. And I want you to just move your arms from your right side towards your left side. Basically, you're going to bring your left shoulder under your chin and then chop across your body till your right shoulder goes under your chin. You'll do 10 to 15 of those, and then you'll switch sides. But here's the deal. You can't move anything else. I want you to work on anti-rotation, which means only your thoracic part of your spine is really moving, the mid-back. Why? Well, you're strengthening, again, the transverse abdominis without the chance of you hurting your lower back. So why is this important? Because in the future, you'll be able to do all sorts of crazy chops, axe chops and corkscrews and all these amazing exercises. But first, you need to build your foundation, right? You need to work on the foundation so you can then build the rest of the house. Once your body's strong with the bridging variations, the plank variations, the side plank, you're doing some overall just general great exercises such as the squat and the deadlift, all of those, and you've done your chops. Now you can add the icing on the cake because crunches and full sit-ups and knee pull-ins and all of those things are really just icing on the cake. Meaning they're going to give you the ab definition that you do want. And it's even as fitness professionals, it's hard for us to deny that by training your abs in that way, they don't give you better abs because they do. They honestly do. Training chops and all of those things are phenomenal and they're going to give you a small, tight waist and you're going to look really athletic. The serratus muscles are going to look great underneath the chest. Like they're amazing. And you never need to do crunches and sit-ups. You don't need to, right? But here's the deal. I mean, this is the truth as well. Even one of our favorite exercises as fitness pros, doing something like a half Turkish get-up or a Turkish get-up, it still involves a sit-up. It really does. I know it's a variation of it, but it still is. You're sitting up. It's an important exercise, and it's very important. It's very functional. You should be able to do it. And yes, it does give you better abdominal definition. It doesn't mean you should do them daily, maybe once a week, maybe twice a week, maybe every other day at most, but they honestly will. But here's the deal. You need to master your bridging, your posterior chain-based work, your RDLs. Then you need to be able to do the planking-based exercises. You need to be able to do the side plank. You should be able to do chops. And then after the advanced variations, then you can do the crunches and the sit-ups. So what am I really saying is this, is that you need to earn your crunches and sit-ups. You need to earn the icing on the cake only after you've actually built the cake, right? You need to create all those layers. You need to frost in between each layer. Then you can make it look pretty on the outside. But only after you've done those things. And that's where people get hurt. So the truth is that crunches and sit-ups don't injure people's back. Doing them properly injures people's back. So one, yes, you have to use good form. But the truth is, by the time you've already built the foundation, by the time you work the anterior and posterior chain correctly, by the time you've done foam rolling for your hips, by you get to that time, well, you already know how to work your abs. That's the truth. You know how to do a crunch. You know how to do a full sit-up. And also, why it's also a great reason why, even if you don't want to work with a personal trainer on a weekly basis, you might want to hire a personal trainer once a month to set you up with a program. Meaning they'll take you through 2 or 3 different workouts. You take them on your own for 4 weeks. You meet back up with them. They create another program for you. They watch your form. It's fantastic. I really believe that personal training is one of those investments that pays dividends overall in your life. If you find a really great personal trainer, they're accountability coach, they make sure you do it. They're going to design a really custom program for you. They'll maybe adjust your program as needed that day if you're not feeling well or something's tight. They can show you how to foam roll. If they're really, really good, they know a little bit about nutrition. They can help you with that too. I mean, personal training is where it's at. I always tell people, like, health coaches ask me all the time, where should I start? How should I get in this field? I mean, if you really love health and fitness, personal training, it's the place to start. It really is. So without going on and on, why don't I keep this a little bit shorter of a show? I know I've been doing some longer shows lately. This will be a little bit shorter one. If there are questions, though, please let me know. Feel free to write in at stephencabral.com/ask Cabral. I'm always happy to answer those questions. I get to those questions about 3 to 4 weeks after they come in on the weekend house calls. When your question comes in, it goes to the end of the queue, and I just answer them each and every weekend. If you want a question pretty much that day, like literally Monday through Friday, you want your question answered, go to cabralsupportgroup.com. That is our private Facebook group. We invite all positive people in the world to join, and we're happy to help you literally free of charge, answer your questions. It is our quest. It's our mission to try to give back, to really teach you what we've seen work in our life and the lives of the clients in our practice. So hopefully this helps. Thank you so much for tuning into another show of the Cabral Concept. And please do feel free to pass this show along to anyone it may help. Are you ready to heal yourself and then go on to heal others? If so, the Integrative Health Practitioner Institute can help you discover proven functional medicine protocols that blend the best of 7 different healing disciplines from around the world. I personally share with you the exact handouts and protocols I use in my private practice that enable people to get well, lose the weight, and live longer, stronger. I want to pass this information on to the next generation of health coaches, and that is exactly why I created IHP. We are the future of the health coaching industry, and the skills and knowledge you will learn will make you an in-demand certified health coach anywhere in the world. Although we have many medical professionals taking the IHP certifications, no experience is necessary, and half our members have no previous health certifications. At the Integrative Health Practitioner Institute, our motto is a health coach in every home. Our goal is that you take this knowledge and then share it with family, friends, loved ones, your community, or in a practice where you create a career you love and can be proud of. The global IHP community is filled with some of the most kind and caring people in the world, and we can't wait to welcome you into our world soon. For more information or to set up a discovery call with one of our IHP Health Coach graduates, simply head over to integrativehealthpractitioner.org.